Hello, everyone. Our today's discussion is going to be a special one because we're going to talk about life itself and why it matters the way we see it. And with us in that discussion is going to be Bruce Tift from Colorado. He is a psychologist and a family therapist who uses a combination of Western and Buddhist approaches. And he's also a man who knows that at every moment of our lives, we are already free, which is also a name of his book, Already Free. Welcome.
Thank you. And just some updates. Since the book came out, we have moved. We're on the central coast of California now, and I'm working as a consultant, no longer as a licensed marriage and family therapist, just so people know that.
So you are no longer in Colorado. Okay.
Right. We're in California now.
In California. Oh, that's also good. I mean, California is sunny.
Well, often. Yes.
Yes.
And we're in Lithuania. Is that, or did you say you're?
Yes, Lithuania. It's so right now it's night, but I mean today we had a lot of snow, cold. It's sunny, but it's minus something, so it's not the same weather as in California.
Okay.
It's winter, full blast winter. Yeah. But,
okay.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate your speaking English. I'm sorry I don't speak Lithuanian.
Not yet. Okay, so thank you for being here. And I was, thinking about just going live with you about how we all want to, I guess, experience our life in the most positive way. Always, we search for that for ourselves. We want to give that to our children. All the positive interactions, all the positive experience. And we try to change whatever something turns negative in our lives into a positive experience. But then still we realize that, first of all, it's not sustainable, because when we are always looking for something to change in our lives, it takes a lot of time. And still, I mean, we still could feel this, I don't know, happiness, emptiness, life itself. We could still struggle, or we could still emotionally suffer. And I know you talk a lot about why is that, and you, even if your book, you have those two different approaches. But before we dive in, could you just maybe start with telling why do you think we are always in this pursuit of happiness? Like why we don't seem to find it?
Well, that's a big topic, and many people have a lot of opinions, of course. I don't know, of course. I make up everything I say. So, they're all just opinions. But my guess is that wanting what's positive is probably just very central to our evolutionary biology. I think as living beings, we tend to want to pull in what is going to support our life and avoid or get away from us, change what might feel like a threat to our life. And so a very simple version of that is that we try to pull in what's positive and get rid of what's negative. I don't think that's going to change. I think that's probably hardwired in our nervous system. And it probably, apparently, was a pretty adequate guideline for engaging with life for at least hundreds of thousands of years, maybe millions of years. But it's a big topic, but I would speculate that maybe about 7,000 years ago, when we started to have the first large cities and apparently agricultural lifestyle, that increasingly most of us have been living in a social reality, in addition to the fact that we're still biological beings. So there's still this ongoing tension between what is going to help us have the most positive experience as social beings and our biology that says go for immediate gratification, immediate pleasure, and avoid anything that's disturbing. So I think that at the most fundamental level, life isn't what we would call only positive.
Mm.
That life is beautiful, it's horrible, it's safe at times, dangerous at times. So I think that often people understandably want to achieve a permanent state of happiness or positive experience, and it's just not, that's not in alignment with the reality of life.
Mm.
And so creates a lot of confusion for most of us.
Mm. And struggle, because we want to be happy ourselves and we want to make our kids happy, somehow find a way for eternal happiness and that we would all live, together happy until we pass away, and it just doesn't seem to happen. And would you
Well,
mind telling us how you come to care about even looking into those topics, like why, what?
well, I
Yeah.
don't know. My life's a mystery to me, but if I was going to say something, I'd say that I've been interested in sort of the psychological level of experience since I was in adolescence, and um, I got involved with Buddhism after traveling uh, to India and Nepal in my 20s, and met uh, some of the Tibetan refugee community people, and I was very struck by and just they seemed so present and pretty resilient, and there didn't seem to be a lot of sexism. There seemed to be a certain sort of open confidence. It was very attractive. And when I returned to the States, I connected with Trungpa Rinpoche, who was my main teacher until he died in '87. So Buddhism has certainly been a very strong support for my interest, but also my wife and I have been married now, about it'll be 44 years, and I have 3 daughters, and that's been probably as equally sort of a demand to bring oneself into alignment with reality as
Mm.
any spiritual practice.
it's
And
it's
having a body helps, to have to deal with reality. And
it's always easier to understand those things, intellectually, like, okay, I get it, like, yeah, meditation, yeah, I know what it is. I mean, I just sit on this, mat and just stay for a while. But when I go back to my life and I have a family and kids and a chaos inside my kitchen, suddenly it's not that obvious, and suddenly it's not that, simple to do, because yeah, because I guess life gets back at us, and if it's hard to, I don't know how much time did you spend practicing, but it's when you have your life full of, everything happening, you have a job, you have a family, and practicing some kind of meditation or even awareness seems so far outstretched, like maybe another life.
well, why should anybody take time uh, with something that may or may not be helpful when they have to feed their kids and earn money and deal with their obnoxious partner and everything like that? Uh, so I think people get into spiritual path pretty much either out of some intuition that the suffering in their life is not necessary, but it's continuing. They haven't figured a way to get rid of their suffering by having their kids successful at school or having a
Mm.
car that works. So I think some people, usually not till their 30s or 40s, most people, there's a lot of exceptions, but I think people at some point start realizing that the ways in which I'm trying to have a positive and meaningful, satisfying life give me temporary moments, but they don't seem to be reliable.
Mm.
Some people are drawn to spiritual practice, I think, through big life crises. Maybe they have an illness or a divorce or a child dies or something that really challenges their unconscious fantasy that we can be in control of our life. Some people, probably a minority, just have a certain, I think, I don't know what to call it, a sort of an inward calling that makes the potential, the possibility of being more wakeful, worth the effort that does in fact take us away from very real life circumstances off and on. So it's different, but like anything, if somebody wants to be a musician, they have to go through maybe years of playing scales and feeling very awkward. And why would I practice the piano when my kids are, wanting my attention? So everything we get is inseparable from loss and limitation. It's not just about spiritual practice. If you work, you don't have the time for the kids. If you are a full-time parent, you're not bringing in money for the family, maybe. So it's all a balancing act.
Would you say that you had a happy childhood?
Yeah, not some. It wasn't ideal. My parents were both, for their own, out of their own histories, not very emotionally engaged, but they were good parents. And I was the eldest of three and a boy, so I got a lot of permission to go off. So a lot of my childhood, I was off in the woods or then at school or activities or things like that. So I would say it was a good ground from which to go out and do the world. It wasn't, such an emotionally nurturing family that I ended up just wanting to hang out at home.
I don't know how that is in the US, but here in Lithuania, parents of my generation, I would say we are afraid of how I would call it, traumatizing our kids. So if I would say that my parents were not aware of that, or just that was another generation and they had like other things to do. So nowadays we are all trying to educate ourselves about so many things, and then it's the other extreme. Now we feel that I'm going to say that word and oh my gosh, that's going to traumatize my child. And because we all know, those, that when you are a child and there's a grounded present adult who's gonna digest the life experience for you, so it would be accessible for you. Because as a child, we always feel lost because just the experience might be too much, any of it.
Sure.
And if we don't have that parent just next to us, it could be overwhelming.
Right.
And then we have, those strategies we elaborate as a children, and then we bring them with us into our adult lives, and then we live with them. But the price is just very high because it's like being all the time trapped in the childhood and reacting always the same way. So now that we are aware of that, we are kind of become paralyzed and frozen, like, oh my gosh, I can't even, is that okay if I say that word? Or is my child is already preparing some kind of strategy because that word might be too harsh? What do you think about that? About this over-awareness, maybe, or, this fear of saying or doing things wrong?
Well, it's a big issue, of course. And there are certainly social groups within American society that have a very similar type of hypervigilance about how we might affect our kids. And, Buddhist view, which is my training, is that we should perhaps just assume that all of our experience inevitably is going to have both sane and neurotic aspects. completely entangled with each other rather than one or the other.
Mm.
So there were neurotic aspects to how, let's say, my parents' generation raised kids, or maybe your parents, and there were sane aspects. You know, I didn't get a lot of engagement. I developed a lot of independence, a lot of competency from, you know, being allowed or forced, some combination, to be out on my own a lot. Kids who parents hover over them will maybe have an experience of being more supported emotionally or seen or understood, but they might also end up basically being infantilized because the parents are not willing to let that child have their own life. They are not willing to let them suffer, to make mistakes and so forth. So if there's always both neurosis, insanity, benefit and price tag, I think often the best guideline is to train ourselves to tolerate some balancing process, giving up any fantasy of resolution ever. Sort of be like if somebody rides a bike, they stay upright by cooperating with always being out of balance. There's no resolution. And then we have to train ourselves to start recognizing when it feels like we're going too far in one or the other direction, come back, but then we'll keep swinging there. So I think hopefully with some awareness and curiosity and attention and life experience, that will gradually be able to sense when we're projecting our own fantasies of security onto our kids, and that is not kind to our kids. And then on the other hand, if we went to the other extreme of just saying, hey, you know, they got their life and I've got mine, that's not appropriate developmentally for young kids. So is the more that as a parent we can tolerate never having the right answer, always feeling out of balance, always feeling that we don't know what we're doing, well, then I think that's a better ground from which to pay a lot of attention on a moment by moment level.
I remember we had parent group meeting, and we were talking about, you know, how what we say and what we do affects our kids. And one mom said, you know, I wonder what they're gonna tell to they, you know, therapists like years later in life and gonna see their own therapist, what they're gonna say about our generation. Right. And another mom said, I think they're gonna say, every time I had an emotion, I have to breathe in it and breathe in it and breathe in it. And I just wanted for my mom to say, look, there is a bird in the sky. Like you said, there's always like those two, you know, the same piece, but two different sides of it. Like if parents are too present in my life, then I may be merged all the time with them, and there's not enough of them. Then I develop this independency. But it's always, and we never ever have the answer. This always this groundlessness. Like I don't know. Like how could I even possibly know? I don't know so many things for myself. I could even know for another human being.
Can't. But if somebody's willing to always parent, in this case, or just engage with one's life from a ground of, let's say, not knowing, which could be understood as an approximation of openness, a ground of not knowing, powerlessness, willing to feel the sadness of being profoundly limited people or parents, knowing that it's not possible to raise kids without passing on our own unresolved issues to them. That's not possible. Our job maybe is just to pass on less dysfunction than what we got as kids. And so it really, we can examine that fantasy that trying to parent with no negative consequences for our kids is not that different than looking for a formula like, well, if I can buy a new car and have a nice home, then I've made it, then I'm successful. It's another formula. So it's not really about the kids' benefit a lot of times. It's about our own unresolved fantasy that there's some answer to life, some answer to parenting, answer to being an intimate partner, whatever.
So it's more about what? About validation, being seen, being worthy something. Like we all look for some kind of recognition, for, I don't know, for security, safety.
Well, we look for it because it's not there. We don't look for something that's there. Life is not safe. World doesn't owe us recognition or validation.
But how do we even to begin to live that way? I mean,
We're already living that way.
but we don't like it.
That's right. Well, then.
Stop saying that. We don't like it. We want to live differently. I'm all laughing, but it's so depressing.
Well, reality isn't depressing. It's our aggression toward reality that generates depression or frustration or despair or emptiness or whatever drama we have. No, reality isn't depressing. It's just what it is. But the more that we train ourselves to stay present and honest with ourselves, be willing to feel our vulnerabilities when they get triggered, stay in basically an intimate engagement with ourselves, our others, life, kids. I think, like almost anything, the more present and embodied and open we are, probably we're going to do a better job of sensing and reading what our kids' experience is and what their needs are. So if the little kid has to breathe into her emotions every time she has a feeling, and that's not right for her, if her mother were paying attention, there'd be some information there.
Could you, I don't know, maybe give us some picture about what it looks like? Let's say I'm suffering a loss in my family or an illness, and what does that look like to be with what is? What does that look like? Accepting the reality for what it is. Like, how do I look? What do I say or what I don't say?
Well, why do you think there's a formula that's going to take you out of your uncertainty?
Because I always feel like there is this, it's very hard to grasp that middle ground, because we are gonna deny, and then, you know.
So why not just count? Why not count on never getting that middle ground?
And just never getting there. Yeah, so it's again about accepting that
possibility. So if you wanted, you could say out loud, I give myself permission to never know who I am in this life.
Yes. Let's talk about that. You talk about it in your book, like about this.
Oh, you want to try saying it out loud to see how it feels?
Okay, yeah. So I'm giving myself permission to never know what I'm looking for in life.
Who I am, or what I'm,
Who I am.
how to get what I want.
Yeah, what my happiness looks like.
Or how about I give myself permission to never be the parent I wish I were in this life.
I give myself permission to never be a parent I wish I were in this life.
Yeah, isn't that already the case?
Yes, it is.
Well, so the way that we might work with illness or something like that is to be present, and we're just going to be making it up. But it's like a musician or an athlete or a parent who's been parenting for a while. We're always going to be improvising, but improvising out of a ground of experience and awareness, presence, and so forth. But let's say out of experience, we'll probably do a better job than if we try to engage out of some collection of theories.
So why do you think it's why do you think we should, okay, there's no should, but why do you think we need both approaches? Maybe we don't. We don't. So how do we choose just according to how it feels? Like if I feel more like I could accept every situation and every circumstances that arises in my life, I go with it. Or if I see, I don't know, that I have this always the same pattern around the same situation, and I'm just go and see what's behind, and then maybe it's workable, and maybe I want to work with it, or maybe don't.
Yeah, right. There's no formula there's no resolution to our human life. Different people are drawn to different things. And if somebody's drawn to what we're maybe calling a spiritual path, that type of work, basically, we can understand all of our experiencing as an ongoing experiment. There's never going to be an achievement of understanding, I don't think. And so if we're drawn to something, we'll probably get the best information if we actually experiment. So if somebody's drawn to that view of unconditional acceptance, they could try it out for a day or a week or a month and just see, do I have an intuition that says this might be helpful for me? Or is my intuition say this is a waste of time? If that's the case, why bother? But if there's something there that might speak to somebody on a deeper level, some people would start to make small experiments, usually if they have a life, they're not free to just go off somewhere, but small experiments, and maybe over time they start feeling sort of a lessening of feeling like they're in a state of struggle or self-aggression or pretending to be confused or getting emotionally reactive with other people or things like that. And they might start thinking, oh, actually, this seems to be to my own personal benefit, so maybe I'll keep doing this. If it's not to our benefit, not many of us are going to do it. But we need, for some of these practices, we need to give them some time. It's not overnight.
So it's up on us to decide whatever we want to experience and which way we want to go, and to see for ourselves how it works.
Well, my opinion, which I couldn't prove, is that I think everybody, every second, is choosing, often unconsciously, how to do their best to take the best care of themselves possible. So I think that's going on pretty much continually. It's just that we don't pay a lot of attention to that question and the experience. And like anything, if there's more awareness, probably there's a wider range of information and probably will make better choices. But a Buddhist view, which makes sense to me, is that we're only living in the present moment ever. So the present moment is where we're generating what we call problems. And the present moment is the only location in which we can intervene in what we call problems. So why not train ourselves to consciously participate in immediate experiencing? It doesn't have to be esoteric or anything.
How do you what's your thoughts about feelings? I'm gonna say
What's my
asking
thoughts about feelings?
yeah. Because I mean, so now we hear all the time, you have to feel your feelings, which is a good thing, because before we were like,
not the have to part. That's not a good thing.
Yeah, that's a good thing. But feeling instead of, stucking inside, I guess it's better to feel than to stuck the energy inside. But then
depends. If you're in a war, it's probably better to stuff it and compartmentalize.
Yes, it depends on circumstances.
Yes,
exactly.
Right.
But then if you take it from the Buddhism, Buddhist way of being, living, when they say that, well, feeling, first of all, they arise from our thoughts. So in some way we create them. So why to make such a big deal out of them? It's something that we created by, I don't know, resistance or beliefs about life. And now I have this, anger or frustration or the feeling of, I don't know, inadequacy. What do you suggest? What do you do when you have feelings
Well,
that arise inside? What do you do?
there's different traditions of Buddhism, just like within Christianity. It's not like one thing. My particular training is Tibetan Buddhism or Vajrayana Buddhism. And from that point of view, there is experience which is relative, meaning that it's constructed. It has no objective existence, no essential nature, but it's all we have. And so as a path issue, it makes a lot of sense practically, I think, to gradually bring ourselves into a more and more accurate relative relationship with our experience, and out of relative experience, it's still relative, but relative experience that's out of date or based on bad information, or where we mistake emotions as thoughts and vice versa. So a lot of the work of therapy, I think, can be understood as supportive of a spiritual practice, in that it potentially helps us bring our relative experiencing into alignment with reality more and more. And the more we bring ourselves consciously into alignment with reality, the less confusion we're going to generate, less emotional reactivity probably. Mm-hmm. So given that sort of type of view, I would say that it's helpful in my thinking to discriminate between basic emotions that seem to just be part of our human experience, like anxiety and fear and grief and rage, sadness, whatever, surprise, shock. Those and secondary emotions, which are probably later in terms of evolution, but things we might call frustration or jealousy or pride or stuff like that. And then there are thoughts that, at least in our culture, I don't know about Lithuanian, but in our culture, people unconsciously often relate to their story about their experience as if that's how they feel, but it's actually their concepts. Mm. And so to me, the point isn't to dismiss emotions. The emotions are very powerful, they're very important, but I think emotions are, because they're so central to our survival as a species, probably, there were probably emotions on the planet before there were thoughts on the planet. I think it's very helpful to continue to discriminate between feelings and thoughts and behavior. And personally, I would see it as more of a circular process. I wouldn't see it that thoughts create emotions. I would say, to me, it's obvious that sometimes my feelings give rise to thoughts. Sometimes my thoughts trigger feelings. I think it's a circular thing, so we can intervene at any point. But at least from a Vajrayana view, all of our experiencing, even the experiencer ourself, is relative. And the point is to learn to work skillfully with relative experience without taking any of it, perhaps, as if it's of cosmic significance or as if it's personal. It's possible our emotions aren't even about us. But obviously they're there, and so we might want to learn to work with them. But I think we work with emotions best by learning to stay present, embodied, kind, outside of any interpretation. That's why in my work, I often invite people to bring attention to sensation level experience as sort of an anchor for attention to help us stay out of our story about our emotions. because most of what people call problems require concepts to be generated and maintained. You don't find abandonment or humiliation or sort of rejection or something as sensation. Those aren't sensations. You don't find guilt as a sensation. You know, my stomach's tight, my heart's beating fast, whatever. So I think it's very helpful to have a relationship with emotions, but also to understand that it might be valuable to go beneath or outside of emotions, so we don't just take them as if they're the only reality. So I think it's often very helpful to understand that for most of us, educated middle class people would be having this sort of conversation anyway, that our thinking often is more evolved than our emotional organization or experience. And that's probably going to be true for most of us. Maybe traditional cultures, it could be different, but for us. So I think it's very important to establish a type of dialogue or conversation between our thoughts and our feelings without taking side as if either is an accurate representation of reality. And again, we're left in some middle ground that can never be really pinned down.
We will never know. It's always about the same. We'll never know. I love that you say that connection between feelings and sensations, and you talk about it in your book too. I love when you ask to look by ourselves for some proof that, you know, I feel like, let's say, anger, or I feel frustration. Like, where's the proof? And the only proof we've got, I feel something in my body, but I have a sensation, something in my stomach or in my throat or in my hands. And so this is like intensity in my body. And that what makes us go and act on it.
No, it doesn't make us go and act. It's our effort to get out of that intensity, perhaps, that makes us go and act. It's an escape from vulnerability. It's not the vulnerability itself, maybe.
Because we don't seem to be able to tolerate that in our bodies. We just want to get out of it. Yes, yeah. It's hard. Sometimes it's a very small feeling, or sometimes a very small sensation, a very tiny one, but then it drives you crazy.
It doesn't drive us crazy. It's our refusal to have a conscious, embodied, kind relationship with that experience that generates what we call being crazy.
Yes.
To me, I think the language that I like most as far as trying to get at the heart of emotional vulnerability is just that an experience of formless panic. I think that's sort of the nature of emotional vulnerability, and nobody likes to feel panic. So we should just assume we're going to try to dissociate as quickly as possible. It's just like in meditation, we learned that we're not going to stay present. We're going to be off in our fantasy states. And so the practice is to come back. A lot of our practices actually turn out to be recovery practices for the indefinite future, not accomplishment practices. Same with our emotional work. We come back to being present and embodied and kind and open, no interpretation, no story, and just hang out, keep our emotions company. It's, if somebody's a parent, often it's helpful just to invite them to recall what it was like when our kids were very little and they were upset and we couldn't soothe them. Hopefully we didn't just toss them in their room until they felt better. Hopefully we keep them company, and we keep them company with unconditional love, even if we don't like the kid at that moment because they're dribbling on us or clipping us in the chin with their head or whatever they're doing. They're, you know, there's other things we want to do. We want them to be happy. Come on. So we might not like our experience, but as parents, most parents, I think, especially with young kids, are able to have the experience of holding that child in unconditional love, which is not dependent on positive or negative experience. And so sometimes that can be a good analogy for how we could practice relating to our own emotions. that we can hold our own emotions in unconditional presence and love, regardless of whether we like them or not.
So how do we cultivate that
Practice,
ability to tolerate those sensations in our bodies?
practice.
So we just we stay in it, and as long as we can, like I'm gonna feel that,
I don't think that works very well myself, to tolerate it as long as we can, because then our attention starts going into some heroic effort rather than a gentle presence with the emotions. It's a type of aggression toward our emotional vulnerability, I think, to do that often. My particular bias is bringing our attention back frequently for very short periods, rather than some half-hour session where I'm going to work through my issues. It's possible.
So as a gentle, brief look
Just
inwards.
what am I experiencing? What am I experiencing right now? And just relax maybe into keeping our vulnerability company, like we would keep our kids company if they were upset and we couldn't make them feel happy or something. And then if somebody wants to accelerate their work, they can even take on proactive practices every day when they get clear about what are the difficult emotions I've been organizing my life around avoiding. We can actually start to invite exactly those emotions into our experience with a memory or a fantasy or something. And as soon as we get activated, we drop the trigger. And once again, just bring attention into immediate embodied, non-interpretive experiencing. And what I think we find usually is that there's sort of this wave-like life that all of our emotions have. We don't have to heal them. We don't have to process them. We don't have to control them or act them out or go to therapy about them or whatever. If we're willing to tolerate what often is sort of this wave of panic, actually. It's not like fun sometimes. It's difficult, but I mean, you're a parent, apparently, right? How old are your kids? Or
8 and 10.
so probably already you're probably feeling more confidence about letting them feel upset. Unless you have to make them breathe into all of their feelings, Say no. I've been doing this for 10 years now. I trust that I will know the difference between whining and distress. And if there's really distress, I'm going to go and check it out and see if they need help. If it's whining, hey, I've got other things to do right now. I'm not going to go and enable you to, remain a 2-year-old.
I think it's very important what you said about that. Not even the most positive things or things that might seem that way, like awareness or even spirituality, that is every person's choice. There is no program, or you should be aware, or you should feel your feelings.
I've never found any voice in the sky telling us the right way to live our life. I know a lot of religions try to supply that, but
Can I ask what was the most difficult for you in your own parenthood story, like you as a dad? Like, because we often listen to people, those job is to kind of, bring all this awareness to us, and we imagine that, oh, so at their home, at their houses, this is a perfect life. I mean, everyone is happy in that house. Everyone is happy.
yes, that's true. I had a perfect family and I was a perfect parent and no problems ever. No, I would say probably one of my daughters had a very difficult adolescence. And so it wasn't just one thing, it was just the continual pain of seeing your child suffer, make difficult decisions, bad decisions, have to suffer the consequences. And just knowing or finding out the hard way, we're actually powerless to save our children from their lives. And so when you really care about somebody and they're suffering and you can't make that go away, I think that's very difficult, very challenging. But all parents have to have that experience.
I guess it would be the most difficult thing in parenthood, to just be present when your children suffer. It feels terrible. It feels like dying. It's
But
harder than your own suffering, I guess.
yes, but apparently it's not dying. It's just a feeling. And it's a feeling that that parent can learn to take responsibility for, instead of trying to make go away by making their kids change.
Yes, exactly. Yes, we want them to change, so we're gonna feel better, and we want them to be happy, so we're gonna feel better.
Of
It's
course.
all about us in the first place.
Well, it's not all about us, but there's a big component that's about us. Yes.
How do we navigate this interaction? I mean, it's as if we are in a relationship with someone, our kids, our partners, are gonna always bring what's inside us, our own stories, and we don't want to bring them to them, I guess, because
Why
we
would
want
you?
to take responsibility for them. How do we?
That's different. Taking responsibility for the fact that we are confused, messy humans is different than not bringing our limitations to others. We can't not bring our limitations to others, but we can progressively become more aware of what those patterns are and discriminate between feelings and behavior, so that we can feel the feelings that give rise to emotional reactivity and still choose to act like a dignified, considerate, mature adult as much as we can. But it has to be a practice, because emotions are very intense. And basically, I think when we get triggered emotionally, we tend to regress and actually lose access to some of our adult capacities, because again, as biological beings, when we feel threatened, our attention just contracts to survival. It doesn't remain expansive. So when we feel threatened, even if it's our partner says something unkind to us or ignores us or something, we tend to shift into more of a survival mode, and we actually lose access to some of our abilities to behave in more helpful, skillful ways. That's one of the reasons why it might be very helpful to train ourselves to have a more and more conscious relationship with exactly the emotional vulnerabilities we don't want to feel. So when they are triggered, which is just when, not if, when they are triggered, intimacy is guaranteed to force these things out in the open, then they might become more and more and more familiar, so that we don't have such a unconscious compulsive reaction of trying to escape or make them go away, which almost always is going to involve those other people.
You know what's counterintuitive? That you said so many things that, and I was laughing, but I mean, they sounded so hope killing, like we are never gonna know, not if but when. All those things, and somehow it's, and I guess that's the idea of this is the whole idea in your book, that more you just are with what is, and you don't hide from it, and you don't try to change it, more you feel relaxed inside, like somehow knowing that it's when and not if. It's I don't know, it makes me laugh. It doesn't make me cry. It makes me laugh. It brings some, I don't know, light feeling inside me, like joy. Yeah.
Well, a Buddhist view of my training uh, asserts that what we are experiencing is always arising out of so many complex factors, let's say 95% of which we have no control over. So we give it our best shot to do 5% of our control to make our lives work well, our kids happy, safe. But because we're not in control of what we're experiencing, really, it's just an endless stream that's always changing. That may not be the most reliable location within which to invest our sense of well-being. A Buddhist view is that it's possible to shift our experiential center of gravity from what we're experiencing to how we relate to what we're experiencing, and basically to move in the direction of conscious participation and open awareness. When somebody starts to have more moments of open awareness, which has no agenda, if there's no bias, then we start feeling possibly much lighter and like maybe not taking this quite so seriously, understanding that being on a roller coaster is not probably a good way to feel equanimity or confidence or sense of workability of things. So in spiritual practice, we could say that the first work is to get off the roller coaster and observe it. But then a Vajrayana view gets a little paradoxical, where we actually learn to be both on the roller coaster and off the roller coaster simultaneously without choosing sides. So if that makes any sense. So
it does. It does. Thank
so
you. Yes, please go.
Oh, I was just going to say, so yeah, I think it's very common that if somebody is willing to bring themselves into alignment with what they find to be the truth of their experience, and for everybody it might be a little different, but I think there's basic human sort of experience most of us have, then we find out for ourselves, where's the problem? And it may turn out that the appearance of problem arose from a refusal to be open to reality, not from the reality itself. Maybe it comes from resistance, not from the truth of our human experience, which is difficult enough, off and on. And so if somebody starts to realize, actually, more and more moments, let's say, I keep checking in and I don't find any problem in being who I am. I don't find any problem in my kids being little crazy monsters. They're just, that's what it is. I've got to, throw them out in the snow, whatever. I'm kidding, of course, because you do a parody thing. If we find no evidence of a problem, it starts to actually, I think, infiltrate or start to become part of the texture of our ongoing experiencing.
I have one more question for you, because you said I don't find any problem in, let's say, because my kids are messy. But how do I say I don't find any problem in my kids suffering or in my own pain? How could I say that? I mean, what does that mean? I enjoy my pain?
It doesn't mean you enjoy it. You don't like it, but you stay present. You stop telling stories about it. You stop saying, if only I had done this or that had happened or there, whatever, then I wouldn't have to feel this suffering. You're feeling it. If you're feeling it, you're feeling it. If we stay present, like to use that analogy of staying present with one's little baby when that baby is disturbed or crying, actually suffering, we stay present. We don't say, oh, I enjoy my little baby suffering, but we stay present. We keep our heart open because that's the truth. Our little baby's suffering right now and we're powerless. We've tried everything. That's good. Well, nothing's worked. And so we're powerless to suddenly make our kid feel better. So we keep them company. We don't abandon them. So basically, we practice stopping abandoning our own self and stay present, kind to the fact that as humans, we're going to suffer off and on. And as parents, we're guaranteed. As intimate partners, we're guaranteed to have raw, exposed, vulnerable feelings that we'd rather not have.
That's so true. Thank you for our time together. Thank you for all those laughs I had, and at the same time, it was very deep insights into so many areas of life itself. Would you mind telling us where can people find you?
Well, I'm an old guy and I'm heading into retirement. So I have a website with an email, and some people contact me for basically consultation at this point. But just if anybody happens to, if I get many more inquiries than I have time. So if I don't respond to somebody, apologize in advance, but that means I don't have any openings and I just don't have the time, don't take the time to return everybody's call. But you know, there's a lot of good therapists, a lot of, you know.
And there is your book. I mean, there is your book already free, which I mean, it's an amazing book for those who love Buddhism in particular, I guess, because it feels so, I feel so relaxed and at ease when I read it. So it's a very good resource. Yeah, already free.
I'm glad it's been interesting.
Have a wonderful day, because I know it's still morning in California. It's already night here, so
Stay warm in the middle of winter there, and
yeah.
yes, and good luck with your talk show. That's great that you're doing this, and you know, being a benefit to people. So that's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.